Have you ever noticed how the biggest military stories are not the explosions you see, but the message hidden inside them? What if the real shock from the strikes on Iran's coast was not just what got hit, but what those attacks revealed about how modern war now works? Before we go deeper, do me a favor that actually helps this channel grow with people who want serious analysis, not empty noise. Hit like, subscribe, and share this video with one friend who always wants the full story behind the headline. Because the headline racing across feeds is simple. U.S. fighters, Iranian coast, precision strikes, fire in the night. But the real story is more important, more complicated, and honestly, more unsettling than a dramatic thumbnail can ever show you. In the last wave of official statements, U.S. Central Command did confirm major strikes against Iran. On July 12th, CENTCOM said it hit dozens of targets at multiple locations with precision munitions. The targets, according to that statement, included Iranian air defense systems, coastal radar sites, missile and drone capabilities, and small boats. Then, on July 29th, CENTCOM said its forces completed what it called a heavy wave of strikes against Iran after attempted missile attacks on U.S. forces the previous day. In that release, CENTCOM said its assets struck dozens of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps targets, including military command centers, missile and drone facilities, coastal surveillance and defense sites, and maritime capabilities. That matters for one reason above all. This was not described as a random burst of anger. It was described as a methodical attempt to reduce Iran's ability to threaten shipping, project force from the coast, and pressure American forces in neighboring Gulf countries. And right here is where the internet starts flattening everything. The title says F-16s. The images people remember are sleek fighters and burning targets, but the official U.S. releases do not spell out the exact fighter model used in those public summaries. They say U.S. fighter aircraft. So if you want the honest version, not the loud version, the bigger takeaway is not one airframe alone. The bigger takeaway is the strike logic: precision, standoff distance, multiple target sets, and a clear attempt to smash the systems that let Iran watch the coast, threaten ships, and coordinate attacks. Still, the F-16 matters in this conversation because it represents the kind of aircraft built for exactly this sort of fast, flexible, multi-role pressure. And if aircraft like the F-16 were part of the picture, the weapons associated with that mission help explain why this kind of strike can feel both surgical and overwhelming at the same time. Think about what a coastal military network really is. It is not just one radar dish facing the water. It is not just one missile launcher hidden near the shore. It is a chain. Radar sees. Command centers interpret. Drone units scout. Missile units threaten. Small boats harass. Air defenses protect the network. Maritime capabilities give the network teeth. Break one link and the system still limps forward. Break enough links at once and the coast stops acting like a weapon. That is why the wording in those CENTCOM statements is so revealing. Air defense systems, coastal radar sites, missile and drone capabilities, command centers, maritime capabilities, small boats. That list is not accidental. It reads like a blueprint for taking apart a layered threat. And when you understand that, the phrase decimated Iran's coast starts to mean something more precise. Not that every facility vanished, not that one strike ended every danger, but that the United States signaled an ability to hit the eyes, the nerves, the launch tools, and the local mobility of a coastal threat almost at the same time. That kind of pressure changes behavior fast. A radar crew that knows it can be found acts differently. A command team that knows it can be reached stops feeling safe. Small attack craft hidden near shore stop feeling like cheap leverage when the other side can destroy them before they matter, even if only part of that network is removed. The psychological effect can spread farther than the blast itself. And this is where the deeper tension begins, because modern strikes are never just about destruction. They are about forcing decisions. They are about making the enemy ask a horrible question over and over again. If we turn the system on, can we keep it alive long enough to use it? Now imagine being on the Iranian side of that equation. After official U.S. statements say your air defenses, your coastal surveillance, your missile and drone infrastructure, and your maritime capabilities were all targeted in one sequence. Even before the dust settles, commanders have to worry about what the next wave could do, which units were exposed, which backups were compromised, and whether moving assets will save them or simply reveal them. That is the first reason this story matters. It is not only about what exploded, it is about what confidence disappeared. The second reason is the weapon logic behind these missions. If you hear people online say, it is just another fighter, they are missing the revolution inside the loadout. The U.S. Air Force's own fact sheet describes the GBU-39 Small Diameter Bomb as an extended-range, all-weather day or night 250-pound class guided munition. It relies on GPS and inertial navigation, and its small size allows increased aircraft loadout, multiple kills per sortie, and a reduced probability of collateral damage. The Air Force also says the weapon can reach standoff ranges in excess of 40 nautical miles. Read that again and let it sink in. More than 40 nautical miles. Multiple kills per sortie, reduced collateral damage, those are not side notes. That is the whole philosophy of modern air power compressed into a few lines. Because in older popular imagination, airstrikes were about brute force, bigger bomb, bigger crater, bigger fear. But the logic now is often the opposite. Carry more precise weapons, hit more targets in one mission, stay farther away from danger, disrupt command and control, limit collateral damage, make the enemy feel exposed everywhere, not because you are reckless, but because you are exact. The same Air Force fact sheet says the SDB system uses a smart carriage, capable of carrying 4 250-pound guided munitions, up to 4 smart weapons per store location. That one detail helps explain why a fighter aircraft can threaten multiple fixed targets in rapid sequence. One aircraft does not need to behave like a flying hammer, it can behave like a hunter with options. And if the mission is to tear apart a coastal threat network, options matter. One target might be a radar site, another could be a command node, another might be a support structure for missile crews, another could be a hardened position tied to surveillance or launch preparation. The exact target list is always classified at a deeper level than public statements, but the concept is plain. One platform can contribute to many precise cuts. That is why the most serious military pressure today often feels invisible until the results appear. The genius, if you want to call it that, is not noise, it is sequencing. First, you blind, then you isolate, then you strike what cannot hide anymore. But there is another weapon in this conversation, and it tells us something equally important about why this kind of campaign is hard to answer. The APKWS, the Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System, was designed to turn unguided 2.75-inch rockets into semi-active laser-guided precision weapons. Open reporting from Air and Space Forces says the system has become valuable as a cost-effective answer to cheap drones, and it notes that the Air Force demonstrated APKWS in an air-to-air role on an F-16 in 2019. That same reporting says the laser-guided system costs less than $40,000 and has a per-shot cost of $24,900. That price detail is not just an accounting footnote. It is battlefield math. And battlefield math decides how long a military can sustain pressure. One of the biggest strategic problems in modern conflict is that cheap threats can force expensive responses. A drone that costs far less than a high-end interceptor can still create panic, force launches, and bleed resources. If a military answers every low-cost threat with a premium missile, it can win tactically and still lose the efficiency war. That is where systems like APKWS become so important. They compress precision and affordability into the same sentence. And when you combine that with fighter aircraft that can move fast, cover wide areas, and adapt during a mission, you begin to see why Iran's coastal tools face a serious problem. It is not only that the United States can hit, it is that the United States can choose from different levels of response without always reaching for its most expensive option. That flexibility creates pressure from both ends. Large fixed assets are vulnerable to precision strike systems like the Small Diameter Bomb. Smaller airborne threats, especially drones, can be countered with more affordable guided rockets. So the defender is trapped. Build bigger, and you may become a clear target. Go cheaper and more dispersed, and you may still be hunted without bankrupting the attacker. And now we reach the real emotional center of this story. Because when people hear about strikes on coastal radar, missile facilities, command centers, and maritime capabilities, they picture steel and concrete. But war always pushes its fear through people. Somewhere, in rooms far from the flames, commanders had to realize that the systems they trusted were visible. Some junior officers had to wait for calls that never came. Some crews had to wonder whether turning on a radar might invite a weapon already on the way. And on the civilian side, families living near military infrastructure had to feel once again what it means when your government puts you close to danger and calls it deterrence. That human layer matters because the central conflict here is not just the United States versus Iran. It is precision versus denial. It is visibility versus concealment. It is command structure versus disruption. It is the constant race between those who build networks of threat and those who build better ways to break them. And if you've made it this far, here's your checkpoint. Don't just watch this story, join the people who actually think through it. Tap subscribe, hit like, and drop the word coastline in the comments so I know you're tracking the deeper strategy, not just the fireballs. Now let's go one layer deeper, because the official July 29th statement contains a detail that changes the temperature of the whole story. CENTCOM said the strikes came after attempted missile attacks on U.S. forces the previous day, and it also said all Iranian missiles were successfully intercepted. Then it added another number that should make everyone pause. More than 50,000 U.S. service members are currently deployed to the Middle East and remain highly vigilant, focused, lethal, and ready. More than 50,000. That number changes how you should hear every future sentence. Because once you understand how many US personnel are in the region, every missile launch, every drone wave, every coastal threat, and every retaliatory strike stops sounding abstract. And this is not distant theory to the planners in the region. This is force protection. It is shipping protection. It is deterrence under pressure. And if you are Iran, that creates a brutal strategic dilemma. If you do nothing, you appear weak after your systems are hit. If you escalate, you risk inviting more strikes against command centers, surveillance sites, missile infrastructure, and maritime assets. If you spread out your capabilities, you may become harder to destroy all at once, but you also become harder to coordinate. If you centralize them, you may operate more efficiently, but you create better targets. That is what modern military pressure does at its highest level. It does not simply destroy equipment, it poisons the enemy's decision tree. This is also why the exact aircraft model, while still important, is less important than many people think. The emotional power of the F-16 in public imagination comes from its identity. It is fast, familiar, proven. It carries decades of military reputation with it. The moment people hear F-16, they do not just imagine a plane. They imagine American reach, speed, and confidence. But military reality is colder than symbolism. Aircraft are part of a system. They need intelligence, targeting, planning, support, refueling, communications, and doctrine. The strike package is bigger than the silhouette in the sky. And that should worry anyone who thinks this was a one-night spectacle. If public statements mention fighter aircraft, naval vessels, one-way attack aerial drones, and one-way attack sea drones in the same broader campaign language, what you're seeing is not simply an old image of war. You're seeing layers, manned aircraft, unmanned systems, maritime tools, precision munitions, distributed attack options. That is a far harder machine to predict and a far harder machine to outlast. There is also a quiet truth here that almost never gets enough attention. Precision changes politics. When the United States can say it used precision munitions to target military systems, instead of speaking in vague language about widespread destruction, it shapes the global argument before that argument fully begins. Precision is not just military efficiency. Precision is narrative power. That does not mean every strike is simple. It does not mean every claim from any government should be swallowed whole. It does not mean civilians never suffer when military networks are built near real communities, but it does mean the side that can credibly frame its actions as targeted, measured, and system-focused holds a major advantage in the information war. And information war matters because this conflict is fought on two maps at once. One map is physical, coasts, bases, radars, command centers, launch sites, small boats. The other map is psychological, headlines, outrage, deterrence, fear, credibility, momentum. The reason this story is spreading so fast is because it hits both maps at the same time. The physical message is, we can reach these systems. The psychological message is, your coastal leverage is not as safe as you thought. That second message may be the more important one. For years, coastal pressure has been one of Iran's most useful strategic tools. It does not need to match the US Navy ship for ship or the US Air Force plane for plane to create instability. Threaten shipping lanes, signal missile risk, use drones, use fast boats, build layers of uncertainty. Make every transit feel dangerous. Make every response feel costly. But the problem with that model is simple. If the other side decides not merely to defend against those tools, but to systematically hunt the infrastructure behind them, the cost of leverage rises fast. Now the pressure is no longer only at sea, it moves backward. Into the surveillance systems, into the coastal defense chain, into the command process, into the logistics, into the confidence of the people running it. And once pressure moves backward like that, deterrence becomes personal. Every commander starts asking, am I next? Every crew starts asking, if we activate, are we marked? Every planner starts asking, can we replace what we lost before they come again? This is why some of the most powerful military actions in history were not the ones that leveled the most ground. They were the ones that made the enemy see the future too clearly. And the future this kind of operation suggests is uncomfortable for Iran. Not because one round of strikes solves everything. It does not. Not because one title on YouTube tells the whole truth. It does not. But because the public facts point in one direction. Coastal military tools that once created leverage can themselves become magnets for precise retaliation. That is a dangerous shift for Tehran. Because leverage only works when the other side fears the cost of pushing back more than you fear the cost of being exposed. The moment that equation changes, the strategy starts to crack. There's another layer almost nobody talks about enough, and it is the speed of adaptation. Weapons like the GBU-39 and APKWS tell us something about the US approach that goes beyond raw firepower. One emphasizes standoff precision and multiple target options. The other emphasizes affordable precision against lower-cost threats like drones. Put those together, and you get a military posture designed not just to strike, but to stay efficient across different target types. That is terrifying for any adversary who depends on mixing expensive assets with cheap harassment tools. Because the ideal response to that kind of mixed strategy is exactly what these weapons imply. Do not waste premium fire on every problem. Match the response to the target. Keep the cost curve under control. Preserve tempo. Tempo is the key word. A lot of viewers hear military analysis and think the important word is destruction. It is not. The important word is tempo. Whoever keeps the tempo controls the emotional rhythm of the conflict. They choose when the other side reacts. They choose when the other side hides. They choose when the other side burns resources. They choose when the other side makes mistakes. That is why coastal strikes like these matter so much beyond the tactical level. They can steal tempo. And when a state loses tempo, it starts losing something even more valuable: initiative. Initiative is the feeling that you are driving events instead of surviving them. When that feeling breaks, command structures stiffen, paranoia rises, communication slows, and even surviving assets feel weaker because they are forced into caution. So ask yourself the question that sits underneath this whole story. What if the most important thing the United States damaged was not a radar truck, a missile site, or a small boat at all? What if the most important thing it damaged was the belief that those systems could be used on Iran's terms? That is the kind of damage you cannot easily display in a parade. And if this breakdown is helping you see the story with more depth, send this video to one person who is tired of shallow war coverage. Then subscribe if you want analysis that respects your intelligence instead of just feeding your adrenaline. Now let's confront the hardest part. What happens next? There are usually three paths after a strike sequence like this. The first path is restraint dressed up as rhetoric. That means loud public language, internal regrouping, and careful avoidance of moves that trigger an even larger response. The second path is indirect retaliation. That means drones, proxies, deniable pressure, cyber activity, or harassment calibrated to send a message without crossing a line too clearly. The third path is pride-driven escalation, where image management becomes more important than strategic patience. History tells us the most dangerous path is the third one, because it confuses emotion with leverage. If Tehran answers a painful blow with something flashy but reckless, it may satisfy the need to appear defiant while deepening the strategic problem. Why? Because the official U.S. language already frames these operations as responses to aggression, attacks on shipping, and attempted missile strikes. That framing makes follow-on action easier to justify politically if another round comes. And remember, the July 29th statement did not sound temporary. It sounded ready. More than 50,000 service members. Vigilant, focused, lethal, ready. Those words are not decorative. They are deterrence, spoken in official grammar. So if you are looking for the simplest summary of this whole event, here it is. The strikes were not just punishment, they were communication. Communication aimed at Iran, at Gulf states, at commercial shipping interests, at U.S. allies, and at every militia or proxy force watching to see whether American warnings still carry force. That is why this story echoes far beyond the shoreline. If coastal surveillance and defense sites can be struck, if command centers can be reached, if maritime capabilities can be degraded, then the aura of protected harassment starts to fade. And once that aura fades, regional players recalibrate fast. Allies become bolder. Proxies become more cautious. Investors recalculate risk. Shipping planners watch insurance and route logic differently. Military staffs revisit assumptions. Governments reread their own red lines. In other words, even a limited strike package can create strategic aftershocks bigger than the visible blast radius. But let me give you the caution that serious analysis requires. None of this means Iran is finished. None of this means every coastal threat has vanished. None of this means future retaliation is impossible or unlikely. Military networks can absorb damage, adapt, disperse, rebuild, and hide. States under pressure often learn quickly. Some become more dangerous after being hit, not less, because humiliation can fuel risk-taking. So the honest conclusion is not triumphal. Now, the honest conclusion is this. The official facts suggest a significant demonstration of American precision, reach, and readiness against Iranian coastal and command-linked military targets. But the real test is not what happened in one wave. The real test is whether that pressure changes behavior over time. That is the question you should keep in your mind after the thumbnails fade. Did these strikes merely destroy targets? Or did they alter the logic of what Iran believes it can safely do from its coast? Because if the answer is the second one, then this was bigger than a tactical hit. It was a strategic warning written in fire, timing, and precision. And maybe that is why this story grabs people so hard. It forces us to look at modern power without the old illusions. Not giant armies marching toward each other, not dramatic speeches deciding everything, but networks, sensors, costs, timing, guidance systems, intercepted missiles, and commanders trying to act under the pressure of being seen. That is the future of conflict in one sentence. If you can be found, you can be pressured. If you can be pressured, you can be controlled. And if you can be controlled, your power starts shrinking before your forces are fully gone. So when people say US F-16 fighters just decimated Iran's coast, understand both the heat and the truth inside that phrase. The heat is the image of sudden, overwhelming force. The truth is more precise. Official statements describe a campaign aimed at degrading air defenses, coastal surveillance, missile and drone capabilities, command centers, maritime assets, and small boats. Official weapons facts show how precision munitions and cost-effective guided rockets support a style of warfare built on reach, flexibility, and sustained pressure. That combination is what makes this so serious. Not just the blast, the message that coastal coercion can be hunted, the message that retaliation can be layered, the message that expensive defenses, cheap drones, command nodes, and maritime harassment tools can all be pulled into one battlefield equation. And above all, the message that, in modern war, survival is no longer only about armor or distance. It is about whether your system can function after the other side proves it understands exactly how your system works. And that is exactly why these operations feel so different from the wars many people grew up imagining. The battlefield is no longer only the place where weapons land. The battlefield now includes cost calculations, reaction time, surveillance reach, and the credibility of every warning issued before a strike ever begins. A coast can look calm on a map and still be under enormous pressure if its radars are vulnerable, its command centers are exposed, and its missile crews know that the moment they act, they may reveal themselves. That kind of pressure slowly eats away at confidence. And once confidence starts collapsing inside a military system, every order feels heavier, every delay becomes more dangerous, and every attempt to signal strength risks exposing weakness instead. That is why the ending of this story is not really an ending at all. It is a warning bell. If Iran takes the message and recalculates, the region may step back from something worse. If it misreads the message, the next round may go deeper. And if the world keeps pretending these events are just dramatic clips for fast consumption, then we will miss the most important lessons staring right at us. Modern power does not always announce itself with the loudest boom. Sometimes it announces itself by making an entire coastline feel suddenly fragile.